I like video games, and I like One Piece. It stands to reason that I should cover more One Piece games on my channel here, but frankly, out of the ones I've reviewed so far, I would say I'm 0 for 2 in terms of great games. With only a few days remaining until the next big budget One Piece game, World Seeker, hits store shelves, what better way to celebrate than to go back to the beginning, to the first ever One Piece game ever released in North America, Shonen Jump's One Piece on the Game Boy Advance. The story behind this first state-bound One Piece game is actually somewhat unique. Most early One Piece games suffer from the same exact problem. They never came out in North America. One scroll down the Wikipedia list and you will find the release countries are near exclusive to Japan for half a decade. At some point while you're scrolling down, you'll find the game we're talking about today, and you'll notice something special. This game only came out in North America. Shonen Jump's One Piece was published by Bandai and developed by Dimps of Sonic Advance fame, and made exclusively for the North American audience. It reused some sprites and backgrounds from our WonderSwan color game released in Japan called From TV Animation One Piece Grand Battle Swan Coliseum. Though Grand Battle Swan Coliseum was a fighting game, this game we got here ended up becoming a side-scrolling beat-em-up. The game is broken down into 6 different worlds with 2 levels and a boss fight in each. These worlds are based on the story arcs that would have been airing on the Americans' 4-kid dub of the TV show at the time that it aired on Foxbox. What this means is that although the episode count was in the mid-200s at the time in Japan, this game covers story arcs that happened in the first 50 or so. For those familiar with the series, that means everything from Luffy's first encounter with Alvida in episode 1, all the way up to the Logue Town arc. If the fact that this is based on the 4Kids dub scares you, fear not. The 4Kids dub of One Piece is infamous for many a thing. It was a very poor localization of this series that sandpapered away all of its edges to make it more suitable to Western child audiences. But it also had a pretty rough voice cast and went a little too overkill with the censorship, replacing muskets and cigarettes with water guns and lollipops. Thankfully, none of that is represented here in the GBA release. The straight-up rip of the WonderSwan assets ensure that the firearms are represented in all of their iron glory, and the game has no voice acting, so we don't need to worry about the ear-grating voices.
Don't you diss Nami or I'll butter you and batter you and deep fry you in oil till you're nothing but fish sticks.
Over on the gameplay side of things, this game holds up quite well. Like mentioned before, it is a side-scrolling beat-em-up that plays basically like every other single licensed side-scrolling beat-em-up on the GBA. Walk to the right while beating up enemies, jump around a little bit, get locked into the screen and kill enemies before you can proceed, and do a boss. It's formulaic, but like most formulas, it's there because it's simple and it works. The levels are paced out well enough so that you feel like you're doing slightly different every minute or so. You play the entirety of the experience as main character Luffy. At first, I was disappointed that the other members of the crew were restricted entirely to summon attacks you can utilize rather than being fully playable characters, but I think fixating on Luffy ended up being the right move. The tighter focus on one character ended up giving us a more robust and focused moveset for our protagonist than most games of this type have. You've got a basic combo that you can pull off by hitting the attack button as well as a charged punch to use as a ranged attack. There's some aerial attacks and even some defensive options where you can inflate like a balloon to defend yourself. What makes Luffy's moveset unique is the same thing that makes it unique in the anime: his rubber body and stretchy limbs. This gets represented in-game by Luffy being able to extend his arm out extreme distances and propel himself off of certain key objects that he grabs. This allows you to rocket around screen, hitting any enemies you run into. A lot of the fighting arenas are set up specifically to take advantage of this core ability, fixing you on a locked screen with enemies coming from all sides, and a grapple point positioned right in the center so you can fly around like a madman. This ability to rocket around gets showcased in the game's platforming as well. In between fights, you'll be running around on screen trying to make some relatively simple jumps, and sometimes angling yourself on these bars is a challenge the game will want you to overcome too. If I'm being honest, I'd say this probably doesn't happen enough, but it's a small gripe. Where the game really comes alive is in its exceptional boss battles. These ultimate challenges at the end of each world are a continued display of the amazing sprite work that the game has to offer, as well as some excellent animation. If you're familiar with the series, you'll fall in love with how beautifully these characters are brought to life, and if you're not familiar with the series, they're gonna make you wanna be. Axe-Hand Morgan delegates his work off to his subordinates and summons them into the fight to attack you. Captain Buggy is nearly invincible due to his evasive powers, and the heavily armored Don Krieg has a ton of different moves in his repertoire. In addition to being great recreations of the early series' most iconic fights, the battles themselves are challenging and fun. All of the enemies have well-established telegraphs for their most powerful attacks, so evading them to land a counterblow is the name of the game here. Each boss is distinguished from the others due to varied attacks and a wildly different arena. Don Krieg's fight opens up with a platforming challenge where you need to evade projectiles for a minute before you even go toe-to-toe with him. Downing one of the bosses will net you a bonus mission where you have to beat up all other enemies in the area so you can obtain some bonus lives, making this one of the first battle royales ever made. How do I start building? The level design as a whole is simple. Like I mentioned before, it's all about running to the right, though occasionally it will mix things up by having you traverse vertically as well. For the most part, the game shies away from having bottomless pits, instead having multiple tiers of level and branching paths. There are some collectibles that you can obtain by venturing off the beaten path if you're interested. The end of each level has you accumulating points which get tallied at the end towards your bounty. The more enemies slain, the higher the bounty, and this bounty carries with you throughout the whole game, which is a nice touch. Shonen Jump's One Piece on the GBA is one of the better One Piece games that I've played, even though that isn't the highest of praise. One of its only problems is its lack of enemy variety when it comes to the fodder you're going to be trucking through the whole time, but it becomes less noticeable due to how robust Luffy's moveset is and how short the game is. It's hard to fault the game for a lot because, frankly, it's a safe and innocuous little beat 'em up. It doesn't try to do anything wildly different, and this conservatism is likely why it feels like such a nice, clean afternoon playthrough, even when revisiting after all these years.